So those that were, well, I think we were all here last Wednesday. Remember that I told y'all all that thing about sevens and 700s and 77s, and it was something significant was supposed to happen on today? Anything happen? I don't think so. May 14th, so far, like I said, nothing has happened. But you know, it's not over. And I think I've debated, but I think I am going to just go ahead. I want to talk to you some of the significance of what has happened. I believe I said last week, I mentioned the fact that there is now a Sanhedrin. Did I mention that? That there's now a Sanhedrin in Israel? Okay, so they have now 70 members, rabbis, in the Sanhedrin. It's the first time they've had a Sanhedrin since since the destroying of Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple in 70 AD. And they also now have anointed a high priest. And they're just getting everything ready for the third temple. And folks, the third temple is where the Antichrist is supposed to come in and put the abomination of desolation. And it was probably going to be his statue, because that's what the Greeks did with Zeus. They put Zeus in there, and they sacrificed a pig on the altar. Just, desolation and all of that. And so that is what's supposed to happen. And in order for that to happen, the temple's got to be built. And not only that, but they're going to need a high priest to help with all the functions, all the ceremonial things. So now they've got that in place. And so that is very significant. And isn't it interesting that they have appointed a high priest, and then just last week, the world got a new pope. And how many know and remember what he did it, not them. They get to choose what name they want to be called. And what is his name?
Leo.
What number?
14.
Leo the 14th. I heard that. I was sitting in the car waiting on Greg. He had gone into Target to pick up something, and I said, I'll just sit in the car, and had the radio on, and they announced it. And I leaped within myself. And first, you guys have this outline, but let's go ahead and go to the second page, the one in color. Now, this is a handout that I gave you all. Oh, did you get, Miss Sheila, did you get the? Great, super, okay. This is a handout I gave y'all back in January. And the significance is when, as we remember in Matthew, Matthew wrote the book of Matthew, and his audience that he was trying to reach out to was the Jewish people. So that's how he starts out. He's like an attorney standing up to support his case of what he's saying. He goes into all the begots in the first 16 verses. This one begot this one, begot this one, begot this one, on and on down. And again, it's supporting his argument that Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is in the lineage of David, King David. And we find this interesting, the 17th verse. Let me go to that. The 17th verse of 1 Matthew, it's It says, thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to Christ. Y'all, we got that 14. Now, isn't it kind of cool that we're talking about this on the 14th of May? Not that May's the 5th year, number of grace, but the 14th, and we're talking about this. And so this is, like I said, I gave you guys this article, and it was like, what is the significance? What's the deal with the 14 generations? And when you see here, this picture right here, and again, if you've not read the article, read it again. It's really very good. But this is where, if you go to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, they found around 302 AD, the spot, and they marked it, and they built a church around it. And that's what, and I don't know if it was the Byzantine or if it was the Roman Catholic, but one of those religious groups did that. They built a church around it. And what you have to do in order to see the very spot where supposedly the manger was, you have to bend down on your knees and look down into a hole to see the very spot. And I think one of the reasons for that is because, again, you're talking about an area, a climate, sand is constantly, and it's layer upon layer upon layer. That's what they're having to, anything they find, that's why they're having to dig, and then they can find all of this stuff. I saw something on YouTube, and you know how it is with YouTube or the internet. If you look up something, then all of a sudden they say, oh, she's interested in this. Well, she might be interested in this. So now I'm getting all these feeds about Israel. And they have even found now some of the, apparently the Muslims went and bulldozed a bunch of dirt and moved it around. And so they've gone now and they disturbed the area. And now they've gone back, and folks, they have found the tiles from the temple, the second temple. They have found the tiles, and they've been able to even put them in order to see the designs and everything of it. So again, that's my thing of, from them digging. But when we look at this, like I said, you have to look. When you look, you have to get on your knees and you look down. And when you see this, this is this metal circle, and that's the hole that you look down into. And folks, it's got 14 points on it. It doesn't have, I would have thought it would have had 6 for the Star of David, or, but no, they have purposely put 14 points on this. And the reason why is because it is connected with King David, and Jesus is in the lineage of David. When we look on the back side, that's where I have, so this is in Hebrew, this is David's name. Now, when they write it, they leave out the consonants. And you think about it, that's why the name of God, the unspoken name of God isn't it YHWH? And then when we want to try to speak it, we put A's in it and always say Yahweh. But it's just the consonants. So here with David, this is his name. Now, as we know, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a number value. Well, David's David's name starts with a D. That is given number 4. Then the V, they leave out the consonants. Vowels, again, they just use the consonants. And so then that's a V in the middle, and that's 6. And then the next D is another 4. And you know what? Probably they go from here to there. So that's why that one, I'm guessing that's why that one looks fancy. When you add that up, it's 14. And so that's the name for David. That's the name for the Messiah, is 14, because he's in the lineage. And so the next page that you have, the last page, I pointed out the fact that the true Jewish king, the son of David, is Jesus. And you know what's interesting to me? Isn't it interesting that David's name is DVD? You get it, Sheila? So anyway, you look here and look further down, and so you've got this, what Matthew was saying, with him saying there's 14, 14, and 14. It's like he's screaming in capital letters, David, David, David. Jesus is in the lineage of the King David. But if you take all those 14 and multiply it by 3, you've got the number 42. Well, 42 is the number of months that Jesus was on the earth with his ministry. And when you look at the 7 years, you divided that up, and it's 42 months the first half, 42 months the second half. anyway, so that's just, it says, and it says that the Antichrist rules the world, and that's the thing, and I'll repeat myself. I know some of y'all have heard me say this, but as Jesus would say, and again I say, when the rapture, and I'm pre-rapture, pre-trib, I am pre-trib, and so my thing is this: we hear the trumpet, we go up, and I had as a child I thought, boom, all of a sudden the TV's going to say, we now have a worldwide leader, and da-da-da. That's what I thought, you know. But actually, he may show up during the first 3.5 years, but folks, he doesn't get to rule and control until the last 3.5 years, because you know Satan has never had an original thought in his being. He copies, and so he's have you been around little kids and that you get them to swing or something, they'll say, me too, me too. Well, that's Satan. He's that. Me too, me too. So he only gets to rule for 3.5 years. Now, also the same thing with Satan and the comparing the two. Okay, there's the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Well, Satan's got to have a Trinity as well. The false prophet, the Antichrist, and the beast. That's the three, that's the unholy triune. All right, so let's get back to the new Pope. So the last Leo that was a Pope that chose the name Leo was Leo the 13th. And he came in around 1884, 1890, something around that, is when he came in. And supposedly, he really did a lot of good. But they've not used that name in over 100 years. 125 years or something. They've not used that name. And here you got this guy come in. So one, he's the first American Pope there's ever been. Okay, so that's, you know, and then the next is he uses the name Leo. Now, when Leo, what do you think of? The lion. What tribe is David and Jesus from? Judah. What is the symbol for Judah? The lion. And we've just established, what is the number for the Messiah? 14. Connect the dots. How brazen. Like in your face. But you know, a lot of people, they're shrugging. Well, 14's it's an odd number. It's not 7, 10, 12, 3, 5, whatever. It's 14. So, no big deal. He that hath ears to hear what the Spirit is saying, folks. I personally, I believe we have just been introduced to, just went out of my head, false prophet. I believe we've just seen and been introduced to the false prophet that will be during the tribulation time. That means, folks, we don't have much longer. I would be surprised if we see the year 2030. I hope, because I like I said, I want to go up. I don't want to stay down. And so, like I said, so he has named himself Leo the 14th. And so that's very, very interesting. Now, do you remember last week when I was talking about the seers, and I talked about several of the evangelists healing in the ministry, in the healing revivals of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I mentioned a prophet by the name of William Brannan? Well, this is what I found. In 1954, he prophesied that there would be an American Pope. Now, isn't that something? He also prophesied back in the 1930s that we would have cars that were in the shape of an egg and that they would be able to drive themselves. He said he saw people sitting in the car and they were playing some kind of a game in the car, and the car was driving itself. On our phones, do we not have games?
And Google has those cars. Yeah, Google has those cars.
What?
And Google has those cars already.
Tesla.
Yeah, and Tesla. They already have them.
Just like
So, and he 1930s. I mean, my goodness. You know, there were some parts of the United States, and especially the world, but it's like the United States. They didn't have the proper roads for cars yet. You know, out in Montana and the Dakotas and all of that stuff, they didn't. So here, this man from Indiana with a limited education, the Lord shows him this. And so, anyway, I think that is just very, very interesting. So I'm trying to think if there was something else to tell you guys about it. The other thing is I thought this was interesting, is this Leo the 13th. Two things. I'm glad I remember that too. Two things about Leo the 13th. He was the very first pope to be videoed. He is on film. Okay, so that's interesting. And here's another thing. Back around in the 1880s, 1890s, that is when the Zionists came together and started talking about, they had been, but they were really serious about reestablishing the nation of Israel. They came up with the flag. And if you look at that flag, you know, it's got a blue stripe, and then it's got the Star of David. Folks, their flag is a prayer shawl. And it was made by a man that made awnings in New York City. I want to say Brooklyn. But anyway, he designed that. So we had that going on. That was being established. And then again, so here is this Leo the 13th, it takes office. And the other thing during that time is the move of the Holy Spirit occurred. People were starting they were seeking the Lord and seeking for deeper things of the Lord. And that's when speaking in tongues and all of that started happening. It was birthed around that same time. Now, I know in 1906 we have Azusa Street, but there's records of it occurring earlier. And with me being, my background being Church of God, we believe that it was birthed in the mountains of North Carolina and the mountains of Tennessee, in that area. Murphy, North Carolina, in that area. Huh?
Fields of the woods.
I didn't hear you.
Fields of the woods.
Exactly. Yeah.
Church of God.
And I've been there. I've been to that. It's beautiful. The Church of God of Prophecy built a beautiful, it's called the Church of the Woods again?
Fields of the woods.
Fields of the Woods. And what they have done is, and it's beautiful, on the side of the mountain, they have the 10 Commandments written. And you can take a stairway all the way up and all the way down. Have y'all ever heard of the fields? You have? Yeah, and so like I said, when I was a little kiddo, I didn't know I just noticed all these big writings on white things on the side of a mountain, and had a lot of steps to go up and down. I was done. And I said, okay, let's go. But no, they wanted to stay and take pictures and read stuff and everything. So anyway, I think I was probably, 6, 7 years old. But yeah, so that was the thing. So all of that was happening then. Isn't it amazing how we kind of go for spans of time, and it's just like twiddle your thumbs, go to work, come home, eat, go to bed, da-da-da-da-da, nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, bam, bam, bam. It's like, I heard one prophet this morning, yesterday on TV saying, God is accelerating the time. And to me, it looks like that. Isn't it exciting? Y'all are sitting here tonight and hearing this. Now, this thing about Leo the 14th, I did not read this. The Lord gave this to me, and I'm really surprised that others have not come up with this. Others that, for example, Dr. Perry Stone. I'm surprised he's not put any posts like this, because he's all into that kind of stuff. or Jonathan Kahn, you know, with the significance of fortune, because that's a Jew thing. But anyway, but here you are. So let's just watch and see what happens going on with the days ahead with that. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Okay, so, all right. So we are in the last portion of the first book of Samuel. The icon for that is a prophet. And that's when we learned, you know, the first Wednesday night, we talked about Samuel, how he came about. And we talked about he was the very last judge for Israel. And do you guys remember when Samuel got very old, he had 2 boys. And so he was setting them up to be the next judge. Do y'all remember why the children of Israel rejected them? Do you remember that? It's because they, go ahead, yeah. Right. They weren't. They were disobedient. They were taking bribes and stuff like that. And they said, look, we're done with these judges and we want to be like everybody else. So they got Saul. And then, so last week we talked about Brother Saul. And I believe what Ken said. To me, Brother Saul was bipolar. I really think he was.
Oh, yeah.
He's up and he's down, and he's up and he's down. And so he
And music calms him down, so that sounds like bipolar. The music calms him down.
exactly, yes, exactly. So they, you know, the harp, David would play the harp and would calm him down. And so anyway, and he finally just, you know, sort of like the last straw with God. And God said, and Samuel told him, he said, because of your disobedience, your lineage will end with you. There will be no, God has chosen someone else, a man after his own heart. God has chosen. And so you're done. You're finished. And the next one in the line for Saul was his son Jonathan. He was the firstborn, and so he was grooming him, getting him ready to be the next king. So meanwhile, let's go back, because like I said, I love this. When we ended last week, we talked about in the last chapter of the 15th, the last verse of the 15th chapter. Verse 35, until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him, and the Lord was grieved that he had made Saul king over Israel. Chapter 16, the first verse says, and the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? And I talked about the fact, and I'll mention it again, there's some that we're grieving over something, and God is wanting to say to us, let it go. I have something else planned. Something's going to be better. I heard, Kenneth Hagin, I heard him, he was talking about his brother-in-law. He had a brother-in-law he said was just wonderful. He had a little country store. We're talking, this is back in the 30s. And so, you know, groceries and stuff, it's a depression. And this man would give you the shirt off of his back. He would give you, people come in and he'd give them groceries and wouldn't charge them and stuff like that. But he other than that, he was not a good man. He cheated on his wife and just on and on and on. And Kenneth Hagin had a burden for him, and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed for him, and he tried to talk to him about giving his heart to the Lord, and to no avail. And finally, the Lord said to him, stop praying for him. He has made up his mind, and so stop praying for him. And that's what he did. Now again, Kenneth Hagin is the leader of the faith movement, but the Lord said to him to stop praying, because you know one of the things like with the faith is, somebody, they're laying on their deathbed and you're supposed to rebuke and bind and speak life into them. Well, folks, you need to pray and ask God, God, how do you want me to pray? And I know I'm repeating myself, but how do you want me to pray, Lord? Because there's sometimes, we have a free will, so we can't force anybody to stay. And if they want to go home, then God's going to take them home. So you need to ask. And so that was kind of the thing, like with Miss Gerald. The thought was finding out what her condition and everything like that. And so I found myself and some of the other ladies, we were praying, God, go ahead and take her. Let her die with dignity. Let her pass with dignity. Let her not have to suffer. Lay there and suffer and suffer. Do you know Gerald Ann? Miss Gerald Ann passed away.
I'm sorry.
Gerald Ann passed away. Yes, she passed away this morning.
I did not know that.
Yes. So she had a massive stroke at home on Monday, and a neighbor found her, and they took her to Nash General. And so this morning she peacefully and with dignity went home. And so again, that was, there's been more than one that the Lord has said, I'm taking them. My dad, when my grandmother was dying, and that's my mom's mom, in the hospital, and my mother had left to get a change of clothes, get something to eat. And so Daddy went in there to sit with Grandma while Mom was out. And every time he would tell us, he would start crying. Now, my dad was a gunnery sergeant. If he was in the Marines, he would be a gunnery sergeant. He's tough. And every time he'd tell this story, his lip would quiver. And he's trying to keep it together. Because he said an angel came in through the window and said, I've come for her. And he called my mom. He said, Faye, you need to get on up here. And she did. She passed shortly after that. Folks, I want that kind of relationship with the Lord. I don't want to have to go to somebody in another town and spend gasoline and spend the night and pay for a conference fee so I can have a man stand up and say, thus saith the Lord. The Lord says, da 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 da. I want the Lord to speak to me. And so I'll get off that. But so again, just with that. So here the Lord has said to Samuel, wipe your eyes, blow your nose, fix yourself, and get over it. I've chose somebody else. And now this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Jesse's place in Bethlehem and anoint one of his sons. Now, isn't it interesting? He didn't tell him which son to anoint. And so when he gets there, Jesse has a total of 8 boys. Well, when he gets there, Samuel says, I need to see your sons. And so Jesse gets all the boys but the baby. And so here we go, and again, we understand there's something about the firstborn. The firstborn, even the females, I think it's a rule of God's, and not just the Jewish people. We're set aside to worship and serve the Lord, the firstborns. Now that doesn't mean less of the others, but it's like there's like an extra pressure on you. Anyway, so here he comes, and he's got all of his sons, and I imagine Samuel looked, and he said, oh, it's this one, the firstborn. Look at him. Look he looks strong. Because again, how did they choose? One of the things that what we hear about with Saul, what was it they were so impressed with? He was head and shoulders taller than everybody else, and I think he probably was very handsome and very confident looking. Of course, we found out he wasn't. But anyway, so, Samuel goes and God says, not that one. So then he goes, okay, well, the next one, he looks pretty good too. So, okay, nope, not that one. And he goes all the way down to 7. And he says and God says, nope, not them. And he's like, so he says to Jesse, he says, you got any more? Are there any more? He said, well, I got my youngest, and I just keep him out in the field as a shepherd. There's him, and Samuel says, bring him to me. And so when he comes in, and it describes him as being ruddy, so I want to think David was redheaded. I don't know, but he's ruddy. He's has a reddish, complexion and everything. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll meet him one day. But he comes in, and he smells like sheep. He's probably got some stuff in his hair, straw and in his hair, and and he shows up, and I know Samuel. He's probably thinking, him? And at the time, I think David was around 12, 13, 14, something like that. So he anoints him, and said God says that's the one. So he anoints him. Now, have any of y'all heard that the reason why Jesse did not think of David, his youngest, the reason why? Have any of y'all ever heard about that? Supposedly, he was illegitimate. So they're thinking, well, he can't be used. So here's the Jewish tradition on that. Jesse had his wife, and she gave him 7 boys. Well, his eye looked at a slave girl, and he liked what he saw. And he thought, I'm going to marry her. Well, the wife dresses up like her and shows up, so he marries her again and has a wedding night with her. She conceives David. So, but he doesn't know that, and she doesn't bring that out until later on, that's what happened. Isn't that crazy? But look, we've heard some other crazy stuff in this book. And so again, that's why he was not considered, because again, he was considered to be illegitimate. So, but anyway, so like I said, he was chosen. Shortly after this is when Saul, the Lord brought an evil spirit. And the word says that the evil spirit came from the Lord. Now, I'm like a puppy dog. What? What? An evil spirit came from the Lord? But anyway, and this spirit, again, the bipolar thing, up and down with his emotions. And they said, we got to do something, because he's just like a madman. So they reached out to Jesse. I guess word had gotten around that David was a pretty good harp player. And so they brought David in to play, and when he would play, it would calm King Saul down. All right, so that's what happens, and he does that. Okay, meanwhile, them Philistines is up to it again. Now, as we established, they were pushed back into their own territory, okay? But that doesn't mean they behaved. They still would make attacks and then run back, Base, do you remember that as a kid? You say, base, you can't touch me, okay? So they have gotten themselves a champion, and his name is Goliath. And Goliath is very tall. When I was reading in the, if you're interested, there is a website. You used to have to buy the books, an encyclopedia, a Jewish encyclopedia, and it's like $1,000 or so to get this thing. Well, now you can get it online. You can just go look it up, Jewish encyclopedia, and it gives you all these articles and stuff from other rabbis that have written it. So what they said in that is that Goliath was not a Nephilim. Now remember, a Nephilim is a fallen angel that has sex with an earthly woman, okay? Goliath was not that. They said that Goliath, like we have giants today that have got that thyroid or something like that goes wacko and gets, then they get really tall. So supposedly that's what it was with Goliath. So anyway, now the Philistines are like, okay, we got a secret powerful weapon. And so this big old Goliath comes out there, and he stands there, and he says, it was me that captured the Ark of the Covenant. It was me that killed Eli's 2 sons. He starts saying all this stuff. He said, look, I don't have to fight all of you. Just bring one person. Just bring one warrior here, and we'll just fight it out. And whoever wins, then if we win, then you become our slaves. And if that champion, your champion wins, then all of us will come and we will be your slaves. And for 40 days, here's that number 40 again, folks. For 40 days, he taunted and teased those warriors. Now, some people give them warriors a hard time, but listen, let me tell you something. If you have even in your faucet, if you have a drip, 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 it'll drive you crazy. And it intimidated them because he's constantly saying what he's going to do. I mean, and here he is, he's standing, he's got the helmet, he's got everything, he's got this long, big old sword. And so they start thinking that, well, okay, so this war is going on, this battle, but it's at a standstill. They stay on their side, and the Jewish people stay on that side and just yell at each other, apparently. And so then what happens is Jesse says to David, he says, listen, I want to know how they're doing, my sons, because all 7 had gone. Remember, Samuel warned them, if you get a king, he's going to take your sons and put them in war, in battles. And so here we have, all 7 of them are in the battle there. And he said, so he had David fix up some food and brought it. And so as David's getting closer, he can hear this giant making all this stuff. Well, David has been with the Lord, folks. The Lord has blessed him that he is able to write poetry and songs to the Lord. Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, on and on and on and on. And he hears this, and he knows that guy does not have, the Philistines do not have a covenant. And he calls them, you uncircumcised Philistine, because the circumcision is the symbol of covenant with the Lord. And so David says, who is this? And so we know the fact. What happens is Goliath, he says, I'll fight him. I'll fight him. I'll do it. Here he's about 15 years old. He's a kid. And so they say, oh, well, they bring him to Saul. Now, folks, why is Saul in his tent and not out there with his men? Have you thought about that? They brought him to Saul. And of course, and David says, I can fight him. I have fought the bear. I've fought the lion. I can fight him. I can take him on. And it says that one of the interesting things is it said, we read in the Word, it says, and he went to the stream and pulled out some rocks. Well, according to, again, the Jewish thing, folks, those weren't no little old rocks, like a marble. They were about the size of a softball. And so, that's what it said. I'm sorry, a baseball, because a softball's even bigger. It was a baseball. Anyway, it was, this size. And so he did that, but Saul said, well, okay, well, all right, if you're going to do that, well, let me get you some armor. And so he puts on his armor. And of course, David is used to his way of doing it. Pastor talked about this Sunday. And so here's this little kid, 15, 16 years old, and here you have Saul, a head and shoulders above everyone, and he puts on this stuff and he can't even move. Well, how is he? Okay, y'all that have ever played baseball, you got the pitcher on the mound, and he does this, and he'll kick the thing some, and he'll do that. This, he's got this little ritual he does, and then he'll throw it. Well, David had the same technique of something like that. And here he's with his armor, He can't, okay? And so he tells Saul, he said, this ain't working. Let me do it. Don't, as I say to Greg sometimes, don't help me. Greg, I'll start to do something, and Greg wants to help me, but I'm just like, don't help me. I got it. I got it. And so that's what David does, is he goes out there. But you knew something that occurred to me when we were sitting in church Sunday morning and he was talking about that. You know what I think? Because, Saul was always worried of what the people were saying about him. Folks, was the real reason why he wasn't concerned about protecting David? If he went out there with Saul's armor,
oh yeah,
they're going to think it's Saul.
oh yeah.
And that came to me, and then I whispered in Greg's ear. I said, blah, 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 because have you ever thought about that? Doesn't it make sense? Because he has a reputation. And so I think that he thought they would think, oh, Saul killed him. And so we know, David goes out there, the slingshot, he does the slingshot, and it hits right here, knocks him out. And then David runs, and I don't know if that killed him or just knocked him out. But anyway, he takes Goliath's own weapon and kills him, cuts his head off. And so, and then what happens, the Philistines are like, oh, I think we need to go home. And they leave. And what?
Bad news.
Yeah. And the Jewish people were like, we got him now. And they take off after
I
him.
wonder if they saw David's stones like other stones. They're like, uh-oh, he's got some more. He's coming for us too. He's coming for his brothers.
And what?
They knew that.
Exactly. So, I think he supposedly picked up 5 stones. And the thought was that Goliath had 4 other brothers. So David's like, yeah, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get I'm going to get the rest of you too. And so,
we gotta go. He's coming for us.
yeah. So, anyway, he cuts the head off of Goliath. Now here is something, backdrop. Remember with Ruth and Orpah. Ruth begged Naomi, don't leave me, let me go with you. But Orpah, she freely said, look, Naomi said, you can go back to your family. So Orpah does that. Folks, according to Jewish tradition, Orpah was their mother, was Goliath's mother. And she had the sons. So here you've got 2 sisters that were Moabites. One chose God, one chose the devil or paganism, and here we are later standing off against each other, David and Goliath. Well, what David does is, and this is amazing, so he comes in there in front of Saul, and the interesting thing it talks about, it says, Saul said, who is this person? Well, y'all, we just found out he's been playing for him. What is up with that? That he didn't even know who David was. But there again, I don't know if y'all have, but I've been around people, they don't even look at me. They don't even know my name, and they see me every day. Like when at work, stuff like that. And so he says, who is that person? And but anyway, when they bring David into him, David has got the head of Goliath walking in there, still got the head of Goliath. Oh, didn't put it in a bag or anything. And so, like that. And what David does is he takes that head, after he talks to Goliath, to Saul, he takes that head and he goes to Jerusalem. Now at that time, again, Jerusalem was not the headquarters. The temple, the Ark of the Covenant, had been in Shiloh. But he takes that thing and he buries it under a mountain that we know as Golgotha. Goliath, Golgotha. And Jesus died on the cross at Golgotha. There was an earthquake, was there not? When that earthquake came, it opened up the earth, and the blood of Jesus came down on the head of Goliath. And so that's what David did. Now, you know, the Lord had to tell him that. I mean, there may be a reason, but why in the world would he travel to Jerusalem and bury that head like that? So anyway, that is what happened. Now, I realize now I was talking about Orpah, and then I got, my mind went away. Orpah walked 40 paces with Naomi before she parted. So therefore, the scribes say, he was able to stand there and taunt Israel 40 days for each space that Orpah walked with Naomi. Isn't that stuff fascinating? You know, again, you know, you read this, and it's good. Don't misunderstand. You know, we need to read it and study. But when you can dig a little deeper, there's so much more understanding in the mysteries of the Lord. And folks, of all the generations, all we have to do is turn on a computer, type in something, and we got the whole world of information right in front of us. Don't you think we might have to answer to the Lord? Why we didn't study more? Why we didn't find out more? Now, I do understand that everybody is not wanting to dig and stuff like that. I do understand that. But, you know, we have so many people that come into the church, and I don't mean this church, I mean overall. They don't pick up their Bible. It's like, well, okay, well, look, at least you've got it's right here, a phone, and you know what? You don't even have to read it. You can ask it; it'll read it for you. And they still don't do that. It's like all they're doing is a ritual. Well, you know, we come to church on Sunday morning, and we'll sit here, and we'll have a couple of songs, we'll do an offering, maybe somebody will do a special, he'll get up and preach, and then we go home and, okay, I've done that for the week, check that off. I feel like in the days to come, we're going to need to be closer to the Lord. So, okay, so I have really dwelled on old Goliath, and I know that's a typical story. So on your little outline, so here we've talked 16 and 17, we've talked about David's being anointed. Boy, how did I get that 3 in there? Anyway, and John. Okay, chapters 18 through 20 is about Jonathan and David. Jonathan immediately saw the Lord in David and was drawn to him, and they became best buds. And but at this point, Saul is wanting to get rid. He wants to kill David because one of the things the women were singing their song. Saul killed his thousands, and David killed his 10,000s. And again, that hurt Saul's ego. And so he starts he wants to get rid of David. And he even at one point, David comes in to play for him because Saul had David come and live with him in the palace. And he throws his spear at him to kill him. And so he has to get out of Dodge. He has to leave. But here we have where Jonathan and David become close. And Jonathan even gives him his robe, his sword, several things. He gave them because he knew and sensed, he knew that he was going to be the next king. And they came together. And you know what is so sad is the homosexual community wants to say that Jonathan and David were lovers. Have y'all heard? Did y'all know that? They make, because of some of the wording and stuff like that, that's one of their supporting of same-sex marriage and stuff like that. So David talks to Jonathan and tells Jonathan, your dad's going to kill me. And Jonathan's like, oh no, Dad tells me everything he's going to do. If he was going to do that, he'd tell me. And David says, no, listen, he knows we're close, and he knows that he didn't want to grieve you or anything. So Jonathan, he does find out, and at one point then, Saul even tries to kill his own son with a sword. So we were going through that. Now, one of the things Saul thought he would do is he would get David, he gave him some rank in the military, and he said, okay, I want you to go on special, what is the word? When you're military, you do special special stuff. Mission, special mission. And so what he's trying to do, folks, is send David out to get killed. Now, isn't it interesting? I'm jumping ahead, but isn't it interesting that David did that same thing with Bathsheba's husband? Put him in the front line so he would get killed. So anyway, that's what Saul does. And so that goes along. And then, so next, chapters 21 through 22 is talking about the priest of Nob. And this is so sad to me. But, so David comes to them, and that's where one of the priest is there, and he sees David by himself, and he's very fearful. He says, why are you by yourself? Why don't you have some men with you? He said, I'm on a special mission for the king. And he asks him for some of the bread. He asks them for bread for his men. And the priest says, all we've got is yesterday's holy bread. But you can eat it. So he gave it to them. Well, and also what had happened is apparently David had taken the sword of Goliath and had it there. And it was wrapped up in cloth. And so then the next thing David asks him, he says, do you have a sword? I need a sword. Again, he's probably ran for his life and doesn't, have a sword. And he says, well, we've got this one. It's Goliath's sword. And he takes it. Well, word gets back to Saul that David has been there. Saul goes, and the bottom line is he kills, I believe it's 85 priests. Now, he's supposed to be representing and be the leader for Israel, this holy nation. And here he kills the priests. And then when he got done with that, he went into the town of Nob that was full of priests and their family and their livestock and destroys them. So that's what happens in 21 and 22. In chapter 23, David goes to Keilah and for some help. But he's found out what Saul did because he went to Nob. So this time, David doesn't stay there. And so because of that reason, Saul does not go and destroy Keilah. So I have this in 23, the heading for chapter 23 says, David saves Keilah. I think I'm saying that right. So now what we have is where Saul has made several attempts to kill David. But here are two main attempts. And so therefore here we have two attempts where David spares Saul's life. So chapter 24, Saul, that is when David and his men have gone way deep into a cave, and Saul is there, and Saul needs to go to relieve himself. And so he's sitting there relieving himself, and David comes up behind him, takes a little bit of the cloak, and cuts it. And then Saul leaves, and then he lets him know, I could have killed you. And so that occurs. Now, let me see if no. And so let's see. Well, wait a minute. I'm behind. I got to get. Let me get over here to 23. In chapter 23. Okay. Let's see. In chapter 22, David. It says here in the first verse. It says David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontent gathered around him, and he became their leader. So see, here he's already small beginning, and there were 400 men that joined him. And the interesting thing is he then went to David went to Mizpah in Moab and said to the king of Moab, "Would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me?" So he's protecting and taking care of them, and he's gone again to the Moabites. You know, it's amazing. Listen to me. God will use people to bless you that don't know the God of Abraham, Isaac. Look, if he can have a donkey, then he can use anybody. And I know I had, when I was in dentistry, dental assistant, I worked for an oral surgeon, and they liked to party, and they were known for that. And so I come in there, and not sure how I'm going to be received, because my reputation preceded me that I'm a good person and that I love the Lord. I want you to know they had so much respect for me. They highly, highly respected me. Well, I got to the point where I missed being a family dentistry where you can make crowns and all that kind of stuff. I missed that. So I got it in my head that I needed to go to what I thought was going to be Beulah land. And it was a dental office that was known for being Christian. A lot of the ministers here and everything, they go there simply because they're known for being Christian. Folks, I had more persecution. I had more persecution that place than I did when I was, as I said, working in Babylon. So that's just my point. Yeah, the Lord can use, He can use whatever He needs to use to help you. So here again, David has gone and said, "Will you take care of my mom and dad?" And he says, "Yes, he will." All right, so we talked about that. All right, 23. So here we have, again, 400 men join David. And then when you look on down to 23, verse 13, it says, "So David and his men," now he's got 600 men that have joined with him. And I found this interesting, and I mentioned this to our son today when I was looking at it. It's amazing how many times it says, verse 14 says, David stayed in the desert. That's how David was able to stay away and be safe. He went to the desert. There's no provision in the desert. It's hot. It's dry. But that's where there was safety. That'll preach. Yeah. Wherever God leads you, though, He will take care of you. But sometimes, we remember this from Lot with Abraham. Abraham said, "Look, we got to divide up. Where do you want to go? And I'll take the other part." And Lot saw the beautiful grassy valley where Sodom and Gomorrah was. And he said, that's what I want, is that right there. And Abraham took the lesser, the not so green and all that. So it's just amazing to me how many times it says, and David was in the desert. He stayed in the desert. When David spared Saul's life, it says here in chapter 24, verse 8, "Then David went out to the cave and called unto Saul." Now that's where he's already cut the part of his robe. "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Now, folks, I don't know that I'd be giving this man that's been trying to kill me this much respect, but David did. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you?" See, again, he was paranoid. Saul was paranoid. He said, "This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into the hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you." And that's what they said to him. They said, "Look, you got him. The Lord's brought him to you. Why don't you kill him?" And and he says, so anyway, he says this speech to him. And then Saul comes back and says in verse 16, he says, David, my son, and he wept aloud. You are the more righteous than I. He said, you have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. So anyway, we go into that. The next chapter, and so, they part ways for a little while. And then the 25th chapter is when David is needing stuff, and he's in the desert, but this guy named Nabal is a shearer, and he has sheep and everything. And David and his men have been protecting their stuff. But he needs some supplies. And so he goes to Nabal and asks for supplies, and he says, get away from me. I'm not going to give you anything like that. Well, when they go back, David didn't go to him. He sent some men. When they came back and told David, David went into a rage. And you know what that says? David is keeping calm with Saul because inside he is raging. He don't take no mess. And so he comes, and then we had the story of Abigail. I know we've gone beyond the time. Again, you can, read all of this for yourselves. The 28th chapter is when Saul goes to the witch of Endor. And all I want to say with that, folks, when you read this, a servant of the Most High, a servant of the devil, is not going to be able to call up and bring back on earth a servant of the Most High. That was not Samuel. It was a familiar spirit that she brought in there. So anyway, when you go through this, and there was another time that he tried to, that David spared Saul's life, and then at that time, Saul finally gave up and left him alone. Chapter 31 is when Saul is killed and his 3 sons are killed. Saul actually falls on his sword, and when they come to his body, they cut off his head. And they send it around, just like Goliath's head was in his armament. So it was the same, it was the same thing. And so that's where we are. Now next week we'll be in 2 Samuel, and we will start going into now David becoming the king. Let's stand, and Jack, if you'll lead us in prayer.
Lord, we thank you again that we can come to your house and study your word. Lord, as always, I thank you again for Elizabeth and for the knowledge that you blessed her with, that she shares with us. And God, may we leave this place now, hide these words in our hearts, Lord, and keep them in our minds, God, to further follow you.
Yes, Lord.
And get to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.